So today I'm going to be talking about chapter 27. I'm sorry, 23. So a lot going on here. A very famous chapter about the former history of the Bodhisattva medicine king. And in order to get us kind of in the right frame of mind, which of course is very important in our practice, I'm going to have a few introductory words from Thich Nhat Hanh, and then lead you in a visualization so that we're kind of all on the same page, if you will. So Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "When we hear a Dharma talk or study a sutra, our only job is to remain open. Usually when we hear or read something new, we just compare it to our own ideas." Very important. "If it is the same, we accept it and say, that is correct. If it is not, we say it is incorrect. In either case, we learn nothing. If we read or listen with an open mind and open heart, the rain of the Dharma will penetrate the soil of our consciousness. The gentle spring rain permeates the soil of my soul," Thich Nhat Hanh writes. "A seed that has lain deeply in the earth for many years just smiles. While reading or listening, don't work too hard. Be like the earth. When the rain comes, the earth only has to open herself up to the rain. Allow the rain of the Dharma to come in and penetrate the seeds that are buried deep in your consciousness. A teacher cannot give you the truth. The truth is already in you. You only need to open yourself, body, mind, and heart, so that his or her teachings will penetrate your own seeds of understanding and enlightenment. If you let the words enter you, the soil and the seeds will do the rest of the work." So what I'd like everyone to do is get comfortable in a position on a cushion, on a chair, with your back straight and feet on the ground, or of course, folded if you're on a cushion, hands in a comfortable position, just gazing down very gently and in a relaxed manner at the floor before you. And do a quick inventory first of your body, quick scan to see if there's anything that is giving you any problems, anything that is trying to make itself known in your body. From head through torso, through legs, very, very quickly do a scan of your body. And if you encounter tension and you find that you are responsible, see if you can relax. If it's something that you can't do anything about, also relax. Regarding everything with equanimity. And then the same token in your mind. Push out the past. Don't think about the future. Stay here right now with what's in front of you. Anything that might be troubling you or that you're envisaging in the future, let it go. And we'll begin with the familiar visualization of an apple in your mind. Just see the shape, the color, the texture, maybe even some water drops on the apple. Very, very real in our mind, very vivid. And you can even take a bite out of it, even though you're not touching it. And you can see the apple now with a small part of it removed. And now, in preparation for what we're going to talk about, let your mind expand. Let the apple just disappear. The bitten apple and the apple, anything, just disappear. And what is present is the luminosity of the mind. Pure mind. There is no center, no periphery, no subject, no object, no you, no other, just luminous awareness. Penetrating throughout the body, penetrating throughout the environment, penetrating throughout the universe. quiet, but infinitely aware, not missing anything, not disturbed by anything. The luminous, gently enduring mind. And then take 3 deep breaths. And we can begin. So as I said, we're doing chapter 23 of the Lotus Sutra. And I know there's a possibility that there's some people who are tuning in, if you will, for the first time. So just a very brief history of what we've gone through in the sutra. We have learned about the great vehicle, that one teaching that encompasses all the other teachings yet transcends them. We've learned about Buddhahood prophesized for all beings. We've learned about the use of expedient means, the way that the Buddha reaches us on our level. No matter how profound his teachings, there is a way that we can understand it little by little. And finally, in the latter part of the sutra, which is where we are now, we've learned about the non-differentiation between Shakyamuni Buddha and the universal Buddha. We have found that the Buddha that we thought we knew as someone who was born some 2,500 years ago and passed into parinirvana 80 years after that, that in itself was an expedient means. So we're really left with wide, luminous minds, right? Because there's really nothing for us to hold on to. And that's where the Lotus Sutra is really going, to non-attachment. Also, in this particular chapter, I have to make a disclaimer, which I will make a number of times, I think, because it talks about self-harm, self-immolation in the chapter. And with whatever authority I have invested in me, I do not recommend this for ordinary people at all. And we're going to look much deeper into how we can encounter this kind of teaching and what we can make of it and what use it is to us. So I wanted to get that very straight. And one thing, I'm going to put this in the chat. Sorry, that's really funny. This is, just give me one moment. There we go. Okay. You know, in a live in a live talk, we don't have to deal with these kind of things. All right, so let me go into the chat and let's see if I have copied and pasted correctly. Let me see. Maybe I can't do it. Let's see. Am I? I just wanted to. Let me try it one more time. There we go. Okay. So I'm just putting in the chat so everybody will know what I'm talking about. These are the cast of characters in the sutra, and without a list, it's somewhat difficult to follow. And the actual narrative of the sutra is somewhat difficult to follow, and I'm going to go through it and make it as simple as possible. So, as the sutra chapter 23 opens, and this chapter is called the Bun Shi, right? The former affairs. Wow, this is wild. Okay. The former affairs of the Bodhisattva Medicine King. And see, so it opens with Constellation King Flower Bodhisattva, who is a Bodhisattva, a Mahasattva, obviously, appears in the sutra. There are really no lay people that are spoken to in the Lotus Sutra. This is a great Mahasattva Bodhisattva, who is speaking to Shakyamuni. And we are now in the present moment. And the present moment goes to the past, goes to the future. It's timeless. But as the chapter opens, Constellation King Flower Bodhisattva is speaking to Shakyamuni. And he asks about the Bodhisattva Medicine King. And the Bodhisattva Medicine King, I think is familiar to many people, is really the same as medicine Buddha. It's the medicine Buddha in an earlier incarnation, if you will. But Constellation King Flower Bodhisattva is really curious about the Medicine King Bodhisattva and wants to know how he travels in the world. And this, of course, is a very profound question. Sometimes it's translating as coming and going. He wants to know about his relationship to the world, how he came to be, what his understanding is, what he's gone through, the kind of practices. There's a lot in this question, and it's just yo in Chinese, to travel. That's what the question is about. So the Buddha tells Constellation King Flower Bodhisattva that years ago there was a Buddha named Sun, Moon, Pure, Bright Virtue. And years ago in the Lotus Sutra, of course, is time out of mind, billions and billions of eons ago. And this Buddha, Sun, Moon, Pure, Bright Virtue, and I hope you can see this in what I put in the chat, had many followers. He lived in a very pure land, where everything is flat and roads are made of lapis lazuli. And his lifespan was 42,000 kalpas, which is, once again, incalculable. And there was another bodhisattva named Seen with Joy by All Sentient Beings. And for this bodhisattva's benefit, he preached the Lotus Sutra. And that bodhisattva, seen with joy by all sentient beings, attained a level of samadhi, deep concentration, where he could manifest in any form he pleased. And this is something to really keep in mind as we read through this chapter, the implications of not simply having that power. We often get attracted to this idea of power, but actually this kind of experience, this deep understanding of the world, so that the world is not what we usually ordinary sentient beings think it is. And also, when you attain that level, you don't have to appear or be in the world in any particular way. You appear in the world in order to help sentient beings. And so that's how the idea of expedient means is incorporated in this chapter. So what seen with joy by all sentient being does is he displays his supernatural powers. He makes flowers descend from heaven, and an incense which is so precious that 6 grams of it are worth more than all of the Saha worlds. And once again, the Lotus Sutra is always presenting us with these incalculable numbers, weights, and values, such that our ordinary minds really can't hold on to them. But what he wanted to do was to make an offering of his body to the Buddha. And he said, this would be better than a mere display of supernatural powers. And I'm going to go into that line very deeply a little later. So he covered himself with incense. He drank fragrant oils for 1,200 years. So once again, this is really out of ordinary experience, even considering what happens next. It's not something that any ordinary sentient being could possibly do. And then with his samadhi power, right, which is the San Mei Zheng Hua, true fire power of samadhi. He set himself on fire. And then he illuminated billions of worlds with this flame. And the act that he did was praised by all of the Buddhas. So when his body was finally consumed, he was reborn in the palace of his father. And now this is 1,200 years later. And he asked whether the Buddha, sun, moon, pure, bright virtue was still in the world. And he was. So he went to do homage to the Buddha and explained that he had heard the Lotus Sutra billions of times. And then he sits on a high dais at the height of 7 tala trees and recites verses of homage to the Buddha. And that Buddha, sun, moon, pure, bright virtue, explains that very evening, he is going into parinirvana. And he entrusts the Dharma and his relics to gladly seen by all sentient beings. And the Buddha is cremated, and the Bodhisattva gathers the relics, builds 84,000 stupas, and which is quite an accomplishment, right? But he said he felt that it was not enough. He addressed the great varied assembly, and then he by the way, I may have I said that he was reborn in the palace of his father, and so he's got a whole perfect body now. But he feels that it's not enough, so he burns off his arms, and that lasts for 72,000 years. And his disciples are understandably distressed by an armless teacher, and he declares, "I have cut off my arms, but I am certain to attain the golden body of a Buddha. If this is true, let my arms be as they were before." And so it was. The world shook and jeweled flowers rained down. And everything now is entrusted to this Bodhisattva. And now that was a story in the past. And the narrative now switches back to the present in the Lotus Sutra, our present, if you will. And Shakyamuni Buddha tells Constellation Flower King that was actually the Medicine King Bodhisattva in former lifetimes. And this is something of an explanation of how the Medicine King Bodhisattva travels in the world. It shows his great devotion and his perseverance. And it is in this metaphor of burning, and we're going to discuss this a little more deeply. So then in the chapter, there are 10 praises for the sutra. The Lotus Sutra is the greatest of all sutras, and it is compared to the ocean versus smaller streams, compared to a great emperor, compared to lesser kings and ministers. And there are a number of metaphors like that to show the greatness of the sutra. And then Shakyamuni says this scripture can save all living beings, free them from sickness, inexhaustible merit. Women will not be reborn women, right? That's something to discuss, which is anyone who upholds the sutra shall be first among all living beings. And people will eventually gain all of the Bodhisattva's supernatural penetrations, and their senses will be purified. And all such practitioners will be praised by all the Buddhas, and they will be capable of smashing Mara's rabble, all the Mara's bad guys. And anyone who hears this chapter, which is a very interesting thing in the Lotus Sutra. So the sutra is aware of it being a chapter, which also happened in chapter 12. We're now in chapter 23. And of course, scholars have a view of this, that perhaps there was a a particular following or cult, they use the word, for this bodhisattva. So this is a later addition to the Lotus Sutra. But we don't have to really believe that. I mean, it's not unreasonable, but it is interesting that the chapter is actually cited as something that one can read and benefit from. So if you hear this chapter and you rejoice appropriately, there'll be a whole host of benefits. Fragrance will pour from your mouth. And as it said, your senses will be purified. Many wonderful things will occur. So then, as the sutra ends, we're enjoined to protect this sutra, or this Bodhisattva Mahasattva is enjoined to protect the sutra for 500 years after the Buddha's extinction. And it says that illness will be wiped out and neither old age or death will occur. And I thought I would just read the actual sutra, just the last paragraph. So, Constellation King Flower, if you see someone who accepts and upholds this flower, this sutra, you must take blue lotus blossoms, heap them with powdered incense, and scatter them over him as an offering. And when you have scattered them, you should think to yourself, before long, this person will pick grasses, spread them as a seat in the place of practice, and conquer the armies of the devil. Then he will sound the conch of the law, beat the drum of the great law, and free all beings from the sea of old age, sickness, and death. For this reason, when those who seek the Buddha way see someone who accepts and upholds the sutra, they should approach him with this kind of respect and reverence. When the Buddha preached this chapter on the former affairs of the Bodhisattva Medicine King, that's this chapter, 84,000 bodhisattvas gained the dharani that allows them to understand the words of all living beings. Many treasures thus come one, that's Prabhuta Ratna. In the midst of his treasure tower, treasure stupa, praised the Bodhisattva Constellation King Flower, saying, excellent, excellent Constellation King Flower, you succeed in acquiring inconceivable benefits, and thus were able to question Shakyamuni Buddha about this matter, profiting immeasurable number of living beings. And so that's us. We are the innumerable sentient beings who profit from this. Now the question is, how do we understand what I've just recounted to you? So let me quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, who has a wonderful book about the Lotus Sutra. So he says, the Medicine King realizes the teachings of the Lotus Sutra in another sphere of action. Remember, according to Thich Nhat Hanh, beginning really with chapter 20, he's calling that the action part of the Lotus Sutra. There was the trace teachings in the beginning, the first 14 chapters traditionally, and then the latter ones were called the foundational, the deepest teachings. But Thich Nhat Hanh adds this other idea of the action section. So this is the sphere of devotion, faith, and gratitude. Without faith, it is not possible for human beings to live. Without love, we cannot truly realize our full humanity. We practice the Dharma not only to gain knowledge, but to transform ourselves into someone who is capable of love, affection, and gratitude. And I think it's very important to see deeply into this chapter and see that these things are operative, sort of below and around all of the supernatural things that we're encountering. Medicine King represents this aspect of love, affection, and gratitude. The bodhisattvas in the Lotus Sutra are the arms and hands of the Buddha, carrying out the various actions of the Buddha. Just as Bodhisattva Sada Paribhuta, right, never disparaging, Chang Buching, has a specific role to play. Medicine King Bodhisattva has another role to play. He says that the immolations are rooted in the Lotus Sutra, and I'll talk a little bit more about what Thich Nhat Hanh has as his commentary about how the Lotus Sutra, this chapter in particular, has been understood in the world, and the ramifications of how people have acted according to things that they saw in the sutra. And I think many people know about this, of course, the self-immolations in Vietnam and in Tibet and in other places, and also the self-harming. I will get to that, but one of the, or perhaps maybe the overarching point that I would like to make in this talk is how we don't look deep enough into the sutra and perhaps into ourselves when we practice. It's very easy to be caught in superficialities. So one of the things I'm going to mention, and actually it's probably, all right, so this is the way that I will introduce it. So I'm going to read another section from this chapter, and then I'm going to examine one line very, very carefully. And the reason I'm giving this particular chapter, this particular paragraph, and this occurs after the Bodhisattva has first immolated himself for 1,200 years, been reborn, then burned off his arms. So now the Buddha is speaking in the present moment and talking about devotion. And this is what he says. So, constellation king flower, if there are those who made up their minds and wish to gain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, they would do well to burn a finger or one toe of their foot as an offering to the Buddha's stupas. It is better than offering one's realm and cities, wife and children, or the mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes in the lands of the 1,000,000,000-fold world. All of their precious treasures. Even if a person were to fill the whole 1,000,000,000-fold world with the 7 treasures as an offering to the Buddha and the great bodhisattvas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Arhats, the benefits gained by such a person cannot match those gained by accepting and upholding this Lotus Sutra, even just 1 4-line of it. The latter brings the most numerous blessings of all. So when people read this, and I have a friend who's a pretty well-known Dharma teacher who really doesn't like this chapter, perhaps for a paragraph like this, your takeaway from it is, the Buddha is suggesting, if you will, that people cut off fingers and toes as devotional acts. And this has happened in history. So what I want, so I'm going to do 2 things. And first, I'm going to show how a line can be read and interpreted differently, which has to do with the first self-immolation of the Buddha. Just when the Buddha burned his whole body, I'm going to put in the chat just the line in Chinese and 2 translations. And I think this is pretty fascinating. So we'll see what you think. So let me go to the chat and put this in. Yes, okay, there it is. So here is the thing. This line occurs after the Bodhisattva has used his supernatural powers to rain down incense and flowers from the heavens. But then he says this line. Now I'm going to read it in Chinese, right? So 我虽以身力供养于佛，不如以身供养. That's the Chinese. So Burton Watson and 6 other translators translated much like this. Though I have employed my supernatural powers to make this offering, It is not as good as making an offering of my own body. Now, Leon Hurwitz, who did a very, very well-respected translation, 1974. He was a great scholar, Chinese and Sanskrit. And he translated it this way: though by resort to supernatural power, it is not as if I made an offering of my own body. And as I put in the chat, that's quoted by Thich Nhat Hanh. Now, I will also do something. I have to admit, one has to be honest when giving a Dharma talk. And I recognize in myself that there's a lot of wishful thinking, a lot, perhaps denial. This is something for you to judge, where I want the sutra to say what I want the sutra to say. And this is very much in keeping with that quote I gave from Thich Nhat Hanh in the beginning about how we should not bring our prejudice to the sutra and let it work. So I'm aware of that. So I'm dealing with it, and I'm showing you sort of one really interesting issue. So it all hinges on this Chinese phrase, or the bu-ru. Now, in contemporary Chinese, it means inferior to, right? But it could be interpreted, as Hurwitz did, as not as if, which I happen to like. And I'm sure people will have some opinions about this. And the reason that I like it, I think it actually might even be so, is because one thing we really see when we drill down in the sutra and we step back from all of the supernatural fireworks, if you will, and see what's happening. The sutra is showing us that what we think is our body is an illusion. It's empty. And this is not something that we ordinary sentient beings experience, and that's very important to understand, which is why I made that disclaimer that I am in no way advocating anything that you might superficially see in this chapter. So it's very important to see that. But it's also important, I think, to open your mind and see that this Bodhisattva was able to do some of these things because he's not attached to his body, and he's reached the state of mind, this samadhi, of appearing any way that he wants. So I think we can look at it in a much deeper way. So that's one thing. So now I'm going to make a slight digression before I get into that that paragraph that I read about fingers and toes. So this is going to be a big digression, which I think is very apropos to what we're doing, but there are two examples from science. So first, this is actually a story my father told to me. And you have to listen very carefully, as my father explained it to me. He was a pharmacist, and he went to pharmacy school at Fordham University, believe it or not, in the 1920s. Things were very different then. Pharmacists made their own pills, and they made their own tonics and elixirs. So when he was in chemistry class, he had to learn about the touch, the feel, the taste of various compounds that he was using. So he was in a chemistry class, and the professor was introducing him to the compound of quinine, which is a white powder that comes from the cinchona tree, the bark of the cinchona tree, used to cure malaria, or it had been. But it is one of the bitterest substances known to mankind. So if you see me here, imagine that I have a pile of this substance on this thing I'm holding here. So the professor wanted everyone to get a sense of what this substance is like. So first he licked his finger, And then he took his finger down into the substance, took his finger out, and then licked his finger again. And he had all of the students watch him very carefully. He wanted everyone to do exactly what he had done. And so what happened is when all of the students put their fingers in their mouths with the quinine, there were groans and screams, and people got up, knocked over their chairs, ran for the water fountain. They were like in a state of shock because they had a fairly large amount of this substance on their tongues. And then the professor said to them, I said to watch me carefully. And what he explained is that he had licked his middle finger and he had taken his index finger and dipped that into the substance, which was dry and picked up absolutely nothing. So what he tasted was his finger, not the quinine. So I think that that's very important when you look at the paragraph that I read earlier about offering the foot, the toe and the finger. By the end of the paragraph, it says that just hearing one gato, 4 lines of the sutta, is more meritorious, is more beneficial than all of what happened in the first part of the paragraph. So that's very important to see, to not get caught up in first impressions, if you will. And so now this should be a lot of fun. I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to show a very brief science experiment. Let me get my screen to the right part. Wait, I've got to go here and go to share screen and this. Okay. So, and I'll make it. All right. So now let me explain why I'm doing this. Is so my contention, my thesis is that we don't look at things deeply enough and that we are caught up in superficialities, right? So this is a science experiment that I once saw on a TV show where the scientist who was made his career in introducing people to scientific concepts and getting people very interested. He said that science ravages reason. And this was his example. So it's very simple. And I'm glad I found this on YouTube. It's amazing what is on YouTube. So first I'm going to show, it's 2 soap bubbles connected with a tube. So it's continuing. And so this is the equipment, right? A glass tube with a 3-way valve, a beaker, and liquid soap, right? So there's this liquid, there's the liquid soap, there's the tube. And so first they're opening the valve and blowing a bubble on one side, as you can see. And then they've closed that valve, and now they've opened it to this other tube, and they've made a much bigger bubble. Now, the question is, what happens when both the bubble on the left and the bubble on the right are attached? I mean, they're not closed off from one another. So reason says these 2 bubbles are in disequilibrium, right? So obviously they're going to even up, right? They're going to reach a dynamic equilibrium. So here's what happens. So look at that. So what happens is the big bubble gets bigger and the small bubble gets smaller. There it is. And that makes no sense. And just if you, where was it? And there, just in case you want to know how it works, and I understand nothing of this, there are some of the mathematical formulas behind the way the bubbles work. So what I find interesting about that is the bubbles are pretty simple, what we would think simple things. And the logic of that would seem very simple. But the explanation is that both bubbles have a degree of surface tension. And the larger bubble, because it's larger, has less surface tension than the smaller bubble. So when they're connected, the pressure goes to the area where it can expand the easiest, which is the bubble that already has the lessened pressure. So the big one gets bigger, the small one gets smaller. Very, very counterintuitive. 1 second. There we go. Very counterintuitive. So, and I think this is a good Dharmic lesson in a way, that we look at things and we get first impressions of how they work, what the causes and conditions are, and so we know what we're seeing and we're very sure about the outcome. But this is a very simple demonstration which shows that that is not always true. So I really wanted to make that point, and so let me continue now. So I wanted to make the distinction between the body burning to get something like enlightenment, and the body burning when mind and body have been dropped, as it would be the case for a great bodhisattva, Mahasattva. So the idea that what's happening in the sutra is the kind of self-immolation that we might expect might not be the case. And this is something for people to contemplate. So Thich Nhat Hanh goes into this in fairly great detail. And he points out that a real suicidal person is someone who is so overwhelmed by despair that they don't want to live anymore. And then he talks about the famous monk, Thich Nguyen Duc, who in 1963 self-immolated himself on the streets of Saigon. And it was a picture seen around the world. And as Thich Nhat Hanh said, it actually may have contributed to the fall of the Diem regime in Vietnam shortly thereafter. And so what he said that Thich Nguyen Duc loved life and wished only for his friends and all living beings to be able to live in peace. And so he said, such an act is a very profound offering. What is being offered? The manifestation and the action of our bodhicitta, our aspiration to practice wholeheartedly and realize enlightenment in order to bring all living beings to the shore of liberation. The bodhisattva wanted to offer something more, the most precious thing, his own body. He had realized a level of non-fear and non-attachment, no birth and no death. This body was not his only body. It was not a body at all, in a sense. When the cloud changes form, it becomes rain. And when the rain transforms, it becomes snow. Snow melts and returns to the ultimate nature as water, which becomes once again a cloud. Nothing at all is lost. And once again, the light shone for 1,200 years, giving everyone the ability to see the deathless nature of the ultimate dimension. So now, that is one interpretation and one action that has happened, right? But that is not the only way to look at this, and this is very important. And Thich Nhat Hanh goes on to give another example, and he talks about another monk that was in his sangha called the coconut monk, and because he liked to meditate under a coconut tree, and the coconut monk commemorated a self-immolation of one of Thich Nhat Hanh's students, a woman named Nhat Chi Mai. And what he said is that he would also immolate himself, but he would do it in a slow way. And I think this is very important to understand and to see the deep wisdom in how this can be interpreted. So what he did is he took the bullets and shells around Vietnam, and he melted them and he made them into a temple bell. And he took destruction, the elements of destruction, and turned them around into a symbol of peace. And he made his life a shining beacon. And so I think that's really something that we can really look at and contemplate very, very deeply. And I was thinking about this, how Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," but he needed a body. I think if he didn't have a body, he wouldn't be saying anything. And it's also important. A poem or a line from a poem of Rumi, the great Persian poet, said, let what we love determine what we do. There are hundreds of ways of kneeling and kissing the ground. So this self-immolation, and remember, it's in a sutra, it is metaphoric, and it is beyond metaphor. And that's why Shifu, Master Sheng Yen, in his book, Zhuai Miao Fa Shuo, which I guess is the wonderful explanation of the Lotus Sutra, translated. He talks about a lot of the things that happen in this chapter, and he makes it very clear that these are not acts for ordinary people. We ordinary people can do a lot of things, but we don't go to extremes. After all, the practice is about the middle way, about living our daily lives as they are. And so Shifu keeps using this phrase about some of these incidents in the sutra. He says, "Bu de," which means literally cannot be obtained. And I believe what that actually means is it can't be fathomed. It can't be resolved. It is beyond our understanding. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay attention, but we should be very aware of what our understanding is and really turn the light inward and see what it is that we're reacting to, what it is we're absorbing from the teachings, and be very clear about it. It's really a very, very good lesson. And so I just had a few kind of observations about how difficult it is for us to recognize when we're encountering the world that we mistake our verbal description, our mental description of what we are encountering with reality. So if you think of the phrase, a nice cup of tea, nice cup of coffee, what does that mean? It could mean a million things. It's not particularly accurate, has an emotional resonance. There's a story of Manjushri meditating, and the god Indra comes down from heaven beside him and says to Manjushri, "Thank you for your teaching." And Manjushri says, "I didn't say anything." And Indra says, "I didn't hear anything." So it's beyond our normal senses, beyond our normal understanding. Who could do? And I just put this in. This is just a great quote from Mark Twain. "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much he had learned in 7 years." So, obviously that's a tongue-in-cheek statement. We don't necessarily distinguish between what we're hearing and what we're adding to what we hear. There's this idea of the participant observer, where we're always distorting reality, taking away or putting in very subtle ways. And then we have this chapter from the Lotus Sutra, which is just giving us this rather remarkable, powerful metaphor of devotion and love, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, of deep faith, and a real teaching of non-attachment, if we can see through all the things that are happening in the chapter. And so I just thought to sum up a lot of what Sherfu was saying is, you use wisdom to contemplate the cause of vexation. You contemplate wisdom to sever how we're encountering our vexations. You contemplate the body and you see the non-duality of subject and object. And when in this idea of making an offering, which is something that really has to be understood, it's who is making the offering, what is being offered, what is happening. See the cause and effects behind offerings, behind vexations, and see that they are empty. And so this is what Sherfu calls the true Dharma. When you can see with the wisdom of enlightenment, then you can understand causes and conditions. You can understand that they are empty. And so actually, so what I'd like to end with is a quote from George Bernard Shaw, which I think is really a very wonderful summation of what's in this sutra, but a summation for us ordinary sentient beings. And let's see, so it says, George Bernard Shaw said, "This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to the future generations." So there's entrustment, and this whole chapter could really be described as a splendid torch, and with all the implications, with all the depth and deep Dharma in it, it is really something to be very grateful for, which is how I approach it. So let me I want to read the ending of the sutra. I mean the liturgy. Just give me 1 second, and I will bring it up. Okay. May the virtuous merits adorn and purify the Pure Land of the Buddhas. Upwardly, we repay the 4 layers of gratitude. Downwardly, we alleviate the suffering of the 3 destinies. May those who see and hear the Dharma generate a Bodhi mind, exhausting this body of retribution. May we be reborn in the land of extreme bliss. So thank you very much. It was just great to do this, and I hope it will be helpful for people. And I'm really curious to see if any of the Chinese listeners have a view of Buru and how to interpret that. So let's see, any questions?
Thanks, Harry. If anyone have questions, feel free to unmute and you can raise your hand.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for putting in the quote from George Bernard Shaw. It's really the quote of a bodhisattva. Yes, Michael. Please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Harry. I have two questions. Just first of all, just first one, just in traditional, maybe in mainland China and Taiwan. Just for example, just for the general people, maybe we will have the Bodhisattva vow, the ceremony, and just a traditional some group or some group, Buddhism group, they will burn on their arm or burn maybe there's some vow, maybe to the monk vow, they will burn on their head. And Shifu, Master Sheng Yen Shifu said just maybe some group they also do this. The Shifu said he said that the most important is the vow, the vow for the mind function. So I don't know, just like Tina Han, he maybe he also have some disciple in the Western world. Did he also have this kind of concept, maybe advanced concept, or maybe some Western group that they also keep the traditional?
Thank you. I know I don't know about his Thich Nhat Hanh's practices. I know that Shifu stopped doing that for his monks and nuns. So I actually had a discussion with Chang Wafasher and said that she didn't get her head burned. And I remember a discussion with Guogu, Jimmy Yu, who said that, if burning was a sign of devotion and enlightenment, then a French fry would be enlightened, right? So we have to understand how these things fit in and understand that many people have different understandings and different paths of devotion. And this is something we all have to figure out for ourselves. As I said, I wouldn't suggest that anyone try this, not on my authority, right? But it does happen. So we really have to figure out how we understand it. And I think it's so important. One thing that goes throughout the sutra, the importance of like hearing one gata, one line from the sutra. People often say, well, how is that possible? I mean, one line, what could that possibly do? But I was thinking, unfortunately, about the terrible tragedy that happened in Buffalo with the white supremacists killing at least 10 people, 10 Black people. And if you think about it, whatever evil seed grew in his mind, as opposed to the type that Thich Nhat Hanh is talking, it was just one little itty bitty idea at first, one little phrase that he might have heard, one observation. It could have been just wiped away, but instead it grew until this utterly horrible tragedy took place. And it says in the Dhammapada that all things are preceded by mind. So the sutras and the teachings and all of our teachers and our study and our meditation practice are really showing us the truth of that. So we really have to open ourselves up, but we have to use wisdom states we have to grow the seeds of wisdom, not the seeds of vexation and greed, hatred, and ignorance. And I think that's really important. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Could I ask a second question?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Just as we know, just the Chan Square, Chan sector, the second patriarch, he also cut his arm to ask his teachers, a Dharma master to teach him the Dharma. So do you think it's real, just like the Sutra mentioned, or maybe in the future, if some condition, just like the example you mentioned in the Vietnam, maybe if some monk or is some master, if they want to pursue the Dharma, maybe if they need, they also will cut something of their body. How do you think about it?
Yes. Well, you know, in that particular case with Hui Ke, if you think it's real, if you think it actually happened, or if you think it's not real and it didn't happen, in either case, no blood is going to spill out of you, right? That's something that happened in the past. It's really a question of how you understand the sincerity of his devotion. And remember, when Hui Ke saw Bodhidharma and he complained that his mind was vexed, and Bodhidharma said, fine, I'll fix your mind, just bring it to me. And Hui Ke went and meditated and came back and said, I can't find my mind. And Bodhidharma said, there, I fixed it for you. So if he doesn't have a mind, a body, an arm, you know, it's all in transition. This is the kind of thing you really have to look deeply and see what is important for you in this, right? What are you going to attach to or not attach to in these stories? Because what's really happening is you're living your own story. You're living your life. So, you know, what kind of seeds are you going to grow? I think that's how you use a lot of these things, like the koan about the cutting the cat in half, you know, with Zhao, right? What do you make of it, right? And that's what's really important, because it's too late to save that cat in the Tang Dynasty, right? Whatever happened, happened. So, but it's not too late, you know, for us to save ourselves. That's the real message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Harry. Anyone have further questions?
I really thought somebody might help me with that buru. Does it mean inferior, or does it mean not as if? I just wondered if anyone had any opinions. How about you, Min?
It's hard. I don't.
But do you think it is possible, the other reading?
Yeah. I think, you know, it's all the context.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, I think that it's open, and I just wanted to bring attention to the way that we read things and instantly think we might understand them, when there is a lot of depth that we can still explore.
Yeah, definitely. That's why it's a kind of lifetime learning process.
Yes.
And people see that Kenny put all the text in the chat room. So.
Oh, good. So I hope this was a, you know, I was looking forward to and also dreading doing this chapter because of the subject matter. But I hope I was able to sort of, you know, steer a course through it, so we can look at it with different perspectives. Yeah, definitely. We really appreciate that you could do that, because Lotus Sutra is a very deep, profound sutra, and going through all these chapters is not an easy thing. And glad that you continue on this journey. Yeah. So we so that's it. So I begin in September, and I have 4 more talks, 5 chapters to do. I think I can do all 5 in 4 talks. And And it'll be something. And I really hope that this is just something that will launch some people into take some real interest in the sutra and see that there's so much beneath the surface, so much within the parables and the stories. And once again, I always think of this story of Hakuin, who read the sutra when he was 18 years old and thought, boy, this is really stupid. This doesn't make any sense. And then he's in his 30s and he reads it and he has a great enlightenment experience, and he sees the great truth within it. So we also need this patience, and faith and devotion, and realize how when we do this, we're caring for ourselves and we're caring for everyone around us. So it's a wonderful journey that we're taking together. And I just feel so grateful that I get a chance to study this, that I can breathe in and out. From, today I've been breathing in and out. Hopefully I'll be breathing in and out tomorrow and continue to study. So, I'm just filled with lots of gratitude for everyone's, participation.
Yep, the same here. And we look forward to your further talks on this subject.
Oh, sure. Thank you. We got two Michaels. Did you have a question?
It's a mistake. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just had a quick question. I joined in the middle a few talks ago, and then I also I had to leave because unfortunately graduate school final exams are awful. But I noticed that on the YouTube channel for the Chan Center, there was sort of postings of these talks. Will the rest of these talks will also be posted there? Because I noticed it's also being recorded as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw, maybe me, they were on Facebook, but I don't know that they're on Facebook anymore.
So, okay.
I think all the videos are saved on they can be accessed on Facebook if you check the video tab. I think they're
okay.
Yeah, and Venerable Changjai just also posted that we can find all those talks on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel.
Oh,
okay.
Of Chan Meditation Center.
Great.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
It would be hard following my bubble demonstration just to, it's funny. I was tempted to describe it, which I think I could do, but it would take a long time. But that, like I said, it seems like everything in the world is on YouTube. So I found that experiment.